me and a couple of friends started a club that we call the Jive Turkey, which was in a little space, a little back street club called Mona Lisa's, which hadn't changed since the 70s really. It got flat wallpaper and these great opaque pink screens with big-breasted Afro girls and things like that. Yeah, it was, I mean, a fantastic space. Big,
round dance floor
with a big star that was supposed to flash over the dance floor, but all bulbs had burst.
Round DJ booth.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I mean, perfect space for doing something like that. And it was also so small that you could have a night in there with 150 people and it'd be all right. But if you got 700 people in there, it was absolutely amazing. So absolute perfect size, really. You know, it was, you know, never intimidating, just right, just a really good space, really. And as things sort of took hold, and you know, the house music thing obviously became a national phenomena over the years that we were in that space. So yeah, for, you know, 5, 6, 7 years, it was really good in there.
What we were doing was pretty much unique, really, because I was still travelling around the country at that time as a DJ and as a dancer with my Sheffield crew or whatever, going to different all-dayers and events. And as far as I knew, there was nothing else happening like what we were doing in Sheffield.
I think at first people could be quite taken aback because it wasn't, you know, like going back that amount of time, it wasn't that usual in Sheffield to see a mixed crowd. The crowd that we attracted, there was the kids that just wanted to dance, kids coming off the all-day scene or whatever, but there were also the sort of avant-garde Sheffield musicians, do you know what I mean? And they wanted to hear new music as well. And I think for the first time in Sheffield, the two things fused together and crossed over, which created something else that was new.
And the music wasn't one thing or the other either. It was constantly changing throughout the night. We would play ballads next to like 125 beats per minute tracks next to a jazz track, and they would come in sequence, not in any particular sequence, but just in whatever order. I think what we were doing at the time, certainly for me, I was a guy that represented Sheffield as a DJ on the black scene. So if Sheffield was going anywhere, I was playing. The music what Pirate was playing, nobody had music what Pirate was playing. This guy was playing exclusive 7 inches that you just, you know, some people had never even heard, you couldn't even get. There was a big warehouse party scene in Sheffield as well during the Jive Turkey period. I mean, it's no news to anyone in Sheffield. As DJs, me and Parrot had the monopoly for years with Jive Turkey. So any sort of non-club party environments that were going off in warehouses, like round the corner, we were doing them. Captive audience immediately, and it gave us a brilliant platform to expose completely new experimental music. You know, stuff that didn't even necessarily have any relationship to anyone, but it was just because it was new and experimental. People came for that. It was exciting.
Yeah, I think we were very lucky in Sheffield at the time that we'd still got the sort of tail end of the all-dayer crowd, the sort of black crowd that came to what we were doing, who weren't necessarily a drug crowd, and probably, you know, 99% of them wouldn't have gone anywhere near any ecstasy, but they were there for the music, and then the E crowd were there, and they got into the music for a slightly different reason, through the E. And both crowds sort of managed to keep pushing it forward. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't all E nasties in there.
No, it wasn't.
You know what I mean? It wasn't all footworkers or anything like that. It was just a really good mix of people for a while, wasn't it? For about 2 or 3 years. I think it's more important the actual coming together for me of the sort of disparate scenes in Sheffield that made a more interesting whole. Sheffield's so small as a city, even though, you know, it's apparently the 4th or 5th largest city in the country, that it's very hard for things to get any strength, you know, in terms of a scene or anything like that when they're in isolation. You know, in Manchester or, you know, London, whatever, you can have loads of different things happening at the same time, and there's enough people in each separate subsect or movement to make that strong in its own right. But in Sheffield, you know, you'd have like 5 people over there, 4 people over there, 3 people over there, and it's not enough to get anything going. So you almost have to get all the people together, you know, thinking almost the same thing. And in the sort of mid to late 80s that happened, obviously the ecstasy thing happened, and that helped a lot. You know, even if people weren't taking it when they went out, they could sort of get off on the energy of what was, you know, what was happening in the spaces.
It transformed what we were doing overnight.
Absolutely.
Almost in one event, wasn't it? At occasions.
Oh God, yeah,
We
absolutely.
were DJing in that back room, remember?
Yeah, I remember.
Nightmares with Unique 3 was playing, and the bleeps and stuff like that that were in the tracks at that time became anthemic to those people that had done the ecstasy, and they were calling for the tracks by singing the bleeps. Bloop, bloop, bloop. You know, you knew then who the people were that had had the drug. You know, you know, can't fault it. It was an incredible time, really.
Absolutely. Eventually, the sort of E thing took over.
Yeah.
And I can vividly remember one day looking at the DJ booth, and it was just seemed to be full of young men with no shirts on, and it completely changed. It was really male, you know, really white.
Demanding like more harder music.
Yeah, harder music that
Yeah.
we weren't willing to give them, really. We didn't really want to do that. And it had changed, you know, and it had changed. It had changed, obviously, slowly changed over a period of years, and it basically, Sheffield, to me at that point, just became like another city in terms of what we were doing. That change had happened far earlier in other towns, in Manchester, Leeds, wherever. I mean, Manchester was very much about the hacienda and stuff like that, and Sheffield wasn't like that. I mean, I, to be quite honest, couldn't get my head around it when I went there. It was just almost...
It was just right impersonal, wasn't it?
Yeah, very, very different sort of thing. Big cavernous space, really white, wasn't it, in there? Obviously very, very, very druggy indeed.
Yeah.
Seemed to have lost its soulfulness somewhat somehow. And I think the drug crowd did demand music of a certain tempo, and if you're trying to play music, or if you do play music where the tempo shifts and moves about, it's very difficult. You know, they don't accept that. For the younger DJs coming through, that's what they wanted to do anyway. You know, that's what they knew, and that's what they wanted to feed off. They really liked that kind of thing, so it was natural for them to do it.
They were able to just hone in on one particular thing that the crowd wanted and supply that demand, basically. We weren't prepared to do that because we like to play interesting, innovative, experimental music right across the spectrum, whatever you can get away with. If it's a jazz track, if it's a techno track. And there was no, you can't do that to an E crowd. You can't play your music like that to an E crowd. It's got to be like that, and then be like that, and then be like that, you know, so, and we just didn't do that. We didn't get any excitement out of it, you know.
There were older DJs who'd been around, you know, as long as us or longer than us, who were possibly, or well, almost certainly far more, you know, financially driven than us.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And you know,
knew where they could make money out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Knew where the butter was coming from on their bread, and they were going to exploit it to the fullest they could exploit it. Do you know what I mean? So they got no qualms about becoming rave DJs, whatever DJs they had to become in order to make the best living possible that they could make, which, you know, wasn't really why we were doing it, unfortunately.
There's nothing like it now, no matter how many drugs people take in a venue, you know, there's nothing to match what energy was created from hearing all that new music. I mean, so much new music. You would hear more than 10 tracks on any one event.
But also, I think, you know, going back to what Winston said earlier, you know, there are certain periods, I think, in your life where something happens around you that you're caught up in, and things are very unlikely to ever touch that in terms of the experience that you get out of it. I mean, I remember quite vividly being in the Jive Turkey one night, and Mark Bryden coming up to me all googly-eyed going, you know, it don't get any better than this, it don't get any better than this is as good as it gets, this is as good as it gets. And I didn't actually know what he meant at the time, but every time I think of it now, I really do know what he meant. In terms of nightclubbing, the late 80s in Great Britain were just as good as it got. It's not actually going to get any better than that for nightclubbing. The records were right, the drugs were right, the people were right. The whole thing was just right.